how I'd make a cartoon specifically for adults without shoehorning in shock value and gross out humor, or how not to make Mr. Pickles. This is going to be a very broad topic, and I'll be speaking very generally because there are just as many ways to make a cartoon for adults as there are to make one for kids. There is no right one absolute answer, and everything does have the ability to fail if one unpredictable thing goes wrong. My opinions on adult cartoons are well known at this point. The majority of them are 22 minutes of shock humor with some social commentary deliberately designed to be edgy. So if I personally were to make an adult cartoon, what would I do? Well, the first hurdle is asking the question, where do we begin? As strange as it may seem, with the recent glut of copy-paste adult cartoons on the market, there are many different ways we can tackle adult cartoons. Asking how you make an adult cartoon is kind of like asking how you'd make a video game. Okay, what kind of video game are we talking here? Puzzle game or first-person shooter? I mean, take a look at kids' cartoons and their variety. There are comedies like SpongeBob and Dexter's Lab. There are adventure shows like DuckTales, action shows like Kim Possible, slice-of-life shows like Hey Arnold, fantasy shows, high like Avatar, and urban like Jake Long. There are science fiction shows like Ben 10. However, when it comes to adult cartoons that aren't anime, this video is completely about Western cartoons, there seems to be only one genre. Adult cartoons are a comedy like The Simpsons, a comedy like Family Guy, a comedy like South Park, or a comedy like Mr. Pickles. Once in a while you get lucky and get a comedy and another genre combined like Futurama being science fiction and comedy. The only other genre that adult cartoons seem to want to tackle as a pure genre is slice of life, like King of the Hill or God, the Devil, and Bob. So, if I were to personally make an adult cartoon, I would choose a genre other than comedy. Keep in mind that the shows I use as examples for other genres do tell a lot of jokes, and utilize humorous situations. Not being a comedy doesn't exclude you from being funny or telling jokes. In a comedy, though, jokes should be your primary focus. That's what people come to your show for. Most people don't come to Avatar for its humor, although some do, as there is a lot there. But considering that most people are doing comedy, I should get my ideas about it first. Comedy is the second hardest genre to write. The only genre that's harder to write is erotica. So don't think that being funny is the easy way to write a story. Connecting two plot points together will almost always have the same reaction. Each person has a different reaction to a joke. You can write slapstick very well, but if it's animated poorly, it fails. If the voice actors can't give proper delivery to wordplay, the joke will fail. This brings us to another problem, though. You know how I said adult cartoons are pigeonholed into comedy? Well, adult-oriented comedy in animation is pigeonholed too. At most tasteful, you got the classic sitcom, just in animated form. But other than that, it's just being as shocking as you possibly can. In live-action, adult-oriented comedy, you've got parody, slapstick comedy, deadpan comedy, sketch comedy, black comedy, and so much more. Yes, there are adult cartoons that fall into these subgenres, like Robot Chicken, but most of them are cringe comedy. And bad cringe comedy. A lazy or incompetent writer will show something fucked up in place of a joke. A good writer uses it to add to the joke. Using something fucked up in and of itself as the joke is kind of like holding your house together with hammers instead of nails. Everything is going to fall apart and no one will take you seriously. That brings me to a misconception about comedy. A lot of people think that you can't take it seriously. This is wrong. People take the Three Stooges, Looney Tunes, and the like very seriously, because they took themselves seriously when constructing their jokes. They put their blood, sweat, and tears into getting every aspect of the joke right. And in turn, people take them seriously, as cornerstones of comedy. Comedy is not easy, and one bad joke can ruin everything about your episode. Even if it's not as bad as House Fancy or Peter Problems, it can still take people right out of the mood, and that's something that's very hard to recover from. Let's talk about shoehorning in sex, raunch, or whatever. In my Mr. Pickles review, I said that you have the whole palette of human experience open to you. And you do. In adult cartoons, there is nothing you're not allowed to tackle, and for the most part, you can expect your audience to know what you're talking about. Using this privilege to write 22 minutes of animals getting their limbs chopped off is like finally getting the ability to drive the family car after months of asking, and crashing it into an oncoming train, on purpose. It's a disappointment to say the least. No matter what story you're trying to tell, remember this. There should be merit to everything's inclusion. Virtually everything should have a reason to be there. Cringe comedy works because of reaction. Here's an example from Spirited Away. A spirit made of garbage comes into the bathhouse to be clean and wants to pay. Sen is told to collect his money and holds out her hand. He drops what can be described as oily shit into her hands. This causes an overexpressive look of disgust throughout her entire body. The oily shit dropping into her hands is not the joke. The overexpressive look of disgust is. The characters have to be in more disgust or pain than the audience. That is rule 1 of cringe comedy. Yes, certain people will laugh at the, literal and figurative shit on the screen, but I thought you wanted to write for adults. And to write for adults, we have to ask, what does it mean to be an adult? Well, it means more than you now know what sex is or have the ability to watch more violent things. Try to imagine where knowing what sex is or being able to see violence is the only thing that being an adult means. I don't have to. I've watched Mr. Pickles, an adult party cartoon. There's so much more to being an adult, and that's beyond the stereotypical midlife crisis. There are complicated issues: gun control, homophobia, drugs and addiction, abortion, censorship, political fears, faith and disillusion, adultery, mental illnesses, and many, many more. You can't put most of these in a kid show without metaphor, if at all. Here, you can tell right away what you feel, provided that you know what the fuck you're talking about. I cannot stress this enough. Know your biases before you try to put a moral into your story. The biggest differences between an adult and kids' cartoons are how you present morals. In a kid's cartoon, all you really gotta say is, stealing is wrong. Unless you get something complex like a bullying issue, but those are the exceptions. If you're going to do something like this in adult cartoons, you need to include both sides of the issue, any issue, equally. Don't intentionally make the wrong side more ridiculous or stupid. But what if the wrong side really is in the wrong? Well, why don't you watch Homer's Phobia and get right back to me on that one? For example, your personal belief is that drugs are always bad and we should arrest addicts. Alright, try to see both sides of the issue, because when it comes to adult issues, there is always two sides to the issue, at least. This not only helps you cover your ass, but it does help plant the seeds of drama. Now your character's son has fallen prey to peer pressure and is taking drugs. But your character shares your belief and thinks that everyone who takes those drugs should be put in jail. Even if the son is completely in the wrong, there's a chance to see the other side of the issue. The son can express how hard it is to quit, how his friends are assholes that might hurt him if he's going straight. Not to mention that the father might now be worried that prison would kill his son's future. Yes, if you do this right, your opinions might change at some point, or at the very least, they'll become less black and white. Family Guy missteps on this a lot. Let's ignore the fact that Family Guy is a comedy and we're not supposed to come to it for morals, because that's a different video and this is getting long enough as it is. Not All Dogs Go to Heaven fails because it portrays atheism as the right answer. Even if you are an atheist, you cannot with certainty state that that's the correct answer for everyone. Adult issues are not black and white. You want to get people to think about an issue, not just tell them that they're doing wrong. Make sure the argument and counter-argument are in the same episodes too. You'll look like a major hypocrite if you don't. And make sure the moral is appropriate to the correct person. Don't force anyone in your story to do something that they wouldn't realistically. Every adult issue is complex. That's what makes them adult. Someone has a mental illness that causes them to have random outbursts. This random outburst really hurts someone. It's not really the person with the mental illness's fault, but should we ignore the victim here? Or should we ignore the mental illness? Is there a middle ground? Your character, or you personally, think that suicide is always acceptable if the person wants to do it. Oops, your character's best friend in the whole wide world is secretly very depressed and has killed himself suddenly. You will offend people. It's inevitable. There are plenty of people in the world who have extreme views that they're not going to bend on. They aren't getting angry that you're giving a counter-argument. They're angry that there's a counter-argument at all. That being said, just because people are pissed doesn't mean that you're doing your job right. If you're purposely just pissing people off, then you fail. That is the biggest epic fail ever. At the baseline, no matter what, when you're making an adult cartoon, you're making entertainment, a funny or dramatic story. There is virtually no reason to be exclusionary. Intentionally pissing people off comes across to me as pointless, at best. I kinda did a whole review expressing that opinion of mine. But what about the people who already agree with you when you take a jab at those idiotic insert group of people you don't agree with? You're not talking to them through your media. You're talking to the people who hold a different opinion to you. You don't make people think about an issue when all you're trying to do is reaffirm someone's confirmation bias. And you don't make people think about an issue if you portray their side as clowns or idiots.